It has been said that the more effort you put into something, the more you'll get out of it. This is definitely true for landscape photography, and even a little bit of effort will go a long ways. Planning is important, but it'll only get you so far. You need to stay flexible and work with those unexpected moments. It was on the morning of day 7 that I found myself driving south of the Badwater Basin, well before sunrise. The night sky was filled with a wonderful mixture of clouds, many of which were generated by the mountains themselves. I didn't have a location to shoot that morning, so I simply pulled off on the side of the road and set up my camera in the dark. There was a gap of clear sky between the mountains and the clouds to the east, and I had a feeling that the clouds in my composition would light up at sunrise. I wanted to place emphasis on the mountains, so I went with a long lens and framed a simple composition with the distant salt flats as a foreground element. I watched as the clouds to the north lit up, but that same light never reached the clouds within my composition. I thought the window of light might have passed, but soon enough, warm rays of sunlight filtered onto the mountains themselves. I only had the opportunity to expose 2 sheets of Pro V100 before this fleeting light disappeared. As I packed up my camera that morning, I had a sense of satisfaction. It was dead silent, and I had this expansive view all to myself. I stood there along the side of that road for several hours, and for the entire time I was there, not a single car drove past. That's one of the things I absolutely love about Death Valley. Whenever I go on these photo trips, my goal for each day is to find at least one subject to photograph. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but there's something nice about that because it allows me to feel like I'm being very productive out here in the field. The photo I shot this morning could be horrible, could be good, I don't know, but from my standpoint right now, I do have the sense of satisfaction that I've already done something for the day, which is pretty good. But now I'm going to spend some time scouting the salt flats here and see if I can find anything interesting to point my camera at, whether it's later on this trip or later today or maybe another trip. When you're down on these salt flats, it is very flat. And as a result, it's really hard to see any sort of features out there. But one of the things I have different on this trip compared to past trips to Death Valley is I have this guy right here. So this is the Garmin InReach Mini. Now I bought it mostly as a 2-way satellite communication device where it Bluetooth connects to my phone, and then I can send text messages to my wife and receive text messages anywhere, which is pretty cool. But it also serves as my GPS, and unlike the GPS I've used in past years that had this little screen on it, I can download satellite imagery, and using that imagery I'm able to kind of see exactly where I am, and if I'm trying to find something out here in the salt flats, I have some nice overhead imagery to kind of guide me to it. So that's kind of cool. But there's some interesting like channels and other stuff out here in the salt flats that I'm gonna go take a look at and see if there's any possibilities for some compositions. But it is so absolutely calm and quiet out here. I'm gonna stop for a moment and just listen to the background here. Nothing. It's weird, whenever I come here my ears will ring. Just the sound right now of the salt crunching underneath my boots and me blabbing to a camera. So I've wandered a couple miles or so out here on the salt flats, and this channel back over here is one of the things that I saw on the satellite imagery, and I was really curious about because it kind of meanders all through these sort of the mud flats and salt flats out here, and with all these sort of curving lines, it seems like there should be some possibilities for some interesting compositions. I'm not necessarily planning on shooting it today, but more so just kind of scouting to come up with some ideas for some compositions. Could be for this trip, could be for future trips, but I'll log things into my GPS if I see some interesting scenes and take some snapshots on my iPhone. But without the GPS, I'd have a really hard time finding stuff like this, just because as you're walking around out here, all you see are kind of the muddy salt flats, and you don't really see any of the features that you'd see from above. So I'm gonna wander along this and see if I can find any interesting compositions. So I followed that channel for quite a while, kind of wandered around, and there's some interesting textures and some interesting elements, but
nothing that really struck me as something that I should really take note of and come back to photograph. But definitely a good experience to get out there and explore, which is kind of one of the things that I was intending to do on this trip. Now the clouds are starting to break a little bit. They are still quite beautiful up there, but the light's a little bit more harsh right now. But I gotta start thinking about what I'm gonna be doing for my afternoon and possibly my evening photo. So time to get back to my truck, make myself some lunch, and figure out what I'm gonna do for the rest of the day. So as the afternoon has progressed, it has gotten pretty darn bright out here. Kind of squinting here just trying to record the video. And there's a little bit of clouds up in the sky that way. But this way back here, there's a lot of clouds back over my shoulder there. And there's a fairly decent storm right now going through the Los Angeles and San Diego area, including some thunderstorms and stuff along those lines. But here, it's about 80 degrees right now, very sunny, and if anything, it's a little on the warm side. But I came over here to some areas where there are some mud flows, and I figure since I was able to photograph a fairly wide scene yesterday evening, I figure maybe I'll go for something a little bit on a smaller scale and try to get a photo of some of the mud cracks here. So I found an area that might be pretty decent, but I'm gonna keep wandering around and see if anything else is any better. But definitely a little on the warm side here. So this is the area I decided to set up a composition on. So there's a mud flow that kind of went all the way through here, and as a result there's kind of a bit of an orientation to this mud flow. So it's not super random, and there's some randomness to it, but there's kind of a linear aspect to it. And I have a 450mm lens on my camera, which is a moderately long lens. It's the same lens that I used this morning, and that allows me to kind of isolate some of those mud tiles. And since it was kind of flowing through like this, everything's gonna be kind of slightly diagonally organized, which I think gives some degree of order to the chaos. These mud tiles are fairly large, so some of them are about that big, and a lot of them kind of curve upward a little bit. So I'm hoping that they catch some really interesting light as soon as the sun drops back behind the mountains. I do have to use a little bit of front tilt, which is where you take the front standard, you kind of angle it down a little bit, and when you do that, it helps to make the plane of focus kind of follow along the plane of where all the mud is. So it's a fairly straightforward photo from that sense, and now I just have to kind of fine-tune the composition, make sure everything is the way I want it to be. But I've got plenty of time to do that because we've got like a few hours until sunset, so we'll see how it turns out. The sun has dropped back behind the mountain now, and actually a lot of the clouds here are kind of starting to dissipate a little bit. But along with that has come wind, which is not really good when you have a 450mm lens with overextended bellows shooting some mud cracks there down on the ground. But I was able to expose 2 sheets of Velvia and 1 sheet of Provia, as there was a little bit of direct light hitting them. It's kind of a soft direct light. Sometimes those pictures end up being a little too contrasty, but we'll see. A little bit of an experiment. And I'm just gonna hang around and wait, and hopefully the wind will calm down a little bit, and also hopefully the light will get a little bit more dimensional, which I think is gonna happen, because if you look back over my shoulder there, you'll see that there's a lot less clouds now there than when I was here a little earlier. So I may very well get the light I'm hoping for, and hopefully the wind's gonna cooperate. So the wind is really starting to calm down right now, which is nice. There's just a little bit of clouds kind of back behind the peak over there, lighting up just a little bit right now. There's still a little bit of kind of light from the sky coming from the east over here. And what I'm really hoping is going to happen is that as the east over here kind of starts fading to kind of the darker blues of evening, you'll still have a little bit of a glow of light coming from the west over here. So you have a little bit of warm light coming in this way, a little bit of cool light coming in this way, to kind of catch the edges of those mud tiles and hopefully give it some degree of a little bit of a sense of depth to it. But at least that's what I'm hoping for. Who knows what'll actually happen, but the good thing is that the clouds are dissipating, the wind is nice and calm, and we'll see how it goes. Well, that worked out pretty well. The conditions were pretty much exactly what I was hoping for. So the wind really calmed down, and there was a little bit of a glow kind of on the western horizon back over my shoulder there, giving just a little bit of warm light coming from that way. And then it's a little darker, and then a little bit more of a blue light coming from that way. So that sort of light usually builds kind of a nice dimension to the photos. So hopefully it turned out pretty decent. I exposed 2 more sheets of Provia, and I'm hoping between all those exposures I got something decent. But in any case, it was kind of fun getting out here and pointing the camera at something. And there's definitely gonna be a pretty big storm coming in the next few days, and I don't really think I'm gonna stick around for that, just because I got some projects to work on at home and gotta get things kind of cleaned up and back to normal. So this will be the final day of my winter trip. I want to thank everyone for watching. We'll see you around next time. This ad-free and clickbait-free content and want to help me live my dream. A voluntary contribution of just $24 a year helps keep my gas tank full and my film freezer stocked. For more information on how to support me and my work, please visit the donation section of my website at benhorn.com/donate. I also have prints and my portfolio box set available on my website. You can find a direct link down below in the show notes. Thanks in advance for your support.